Hello and welcome to the Chat Hat podcast, the only podcast where we chat exclusively about all your favourite hats. I'm joined,
Indeed.
of course, by my permanent co-host, Mr. Euan Gilfillan. And this is the voice of your other host, Luke Hurd.
Good afternoon.
I thought we could start out today's episode with a little topic that, quite frankly, I'm surprised has never come up before in our 45 episode series. What is your favourite kind of hat, Ewan?
Well, I like hats with functionality.
Okay, like a sun hat or a winter hat? Is this the right kind of thing?
Yes. Or, as you may know, your average school dinner lady may wear a black baseball cap, for example.
Oh, yes, yes.
But I don't know, I think any hat could be my favourite hat.
Do you think any hat
Yeah.
could have functionality? You said you like functionality. I feel like there is a function for every hat out there somewhere.
I think every hat can have a functionality, no matter, some of them perhaps more niche than others. But what if the functionality is just to look nice? I think that's good enough.
Perfectly acceptable, yeah. As for my favourite hat, it is a tricky question. I think that's why we've never asked it before, because, I mean, how can you pick just one? It's very hard, isn't it? Part of me is like, I do like rare hats, like the Australian cork hat. You know, very
Yes.
cool, very cool. But I do think, at heart, I'm a lover of simple pleasures. Just a good quality baseball cap. That's all you need. That's where my heart truly lies. My first love in a hat was a Southern Comfort baseball cap that was made out of some kind of synthetic material, but it was extremely comfortable, as the name might suggest. Unfortunately, I do not have it with me here today, but that is my all-time favourite hat of all time. Of all time.
What about the hat you're wearing now? Is there a story behind that?
It's interesting you say that, actually. This hat is it's a fedora, right? Which is a matter of, actually, if we can go off on a tangent real quick, it's a bit of, I would say there's some confusion, because a lot of people think that this is a fedora, right? However, the discerning hat milenologist like myself knows that this is actually a trilby, not a fedora, because a fedora must have a wider brim like this one.
Fedoras traditionally have a band, don't they? Do they have to have a band, or is that?
I don't think they do, no. This band is fully removable.
Oh, okay.
And interchangeable, therefore, so you can make it better match your outfit.
Yeah.
I wore this hat most notably for my year 11 prom.
Oh yes, of course.
Of course. Where it served me faithfully.
So are you a hat person then, would you say?
Well, of course I am. I started a podcast about hats. How could I not be?
Of course.
Of course. But even a great hat lover such as myself knows that not all hats are created equal. Which moves us on to our next topic. What is your least favourite hat?
Well, I don't have a genuine answer, but I have a specific example, if I could share very briefly.
Please do, please do.
This hat was a birthday present that I received on I believe my 17th birthday.
Yeah, I was going to say 17th.
A key birthday in life, as I'm sure you all know. In a period I'd rather not remember. I was a school dinner lady, and this hat is a memory of that time that I received from someone I knew at school, and it's a dinner lady hat, as you can
A
see.
dinner lady hat, of course.
And I have many issues with this. It's a memory of a sordid time, and also it says it's bad workmanship. Dinner has got a backwards N in it. My name is spelled humorously wrong. So this is my least favourite hat in my collection. And how it looks ridiculous. Despite having good functionality, it has a hairnet, which is very useful.
What I thought was
hanging up, it's
what I thought was interesting was that it's actually quite similar in shape to a train driver's hat.
Yes.
I wonder if maybe they have similar origins, as they are both tradesman hats, you could say. Yes, I agree. And also, if you're one of the people that works as a dinner lady, but also moonlights as a train driver at night, you only have to buy one hat. This is true.
But I suppose more generally speaking, just off the top of my head, those hats that give the impression of hair different from that actually exists. Like you have like winter hats that have like pointy green hair poke at the top, that kind of thing.
Yes.
I'm not a fan. I don't want to think it gives you a misinterpretation of your personality, I believe. You're going, I want to appear more fun than I am, thus I'm wearing a novelty winter hat.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's funny you should mention that, actually, Euan.
Oh, is it?
This brings us on to our next segment, which is called Newfound Friends. Welcome back to the show. If you're just joining us, we're about to start the segment Newfound Friends, where we detail our latest hat purchases of the week. Before we left, Euan was just saying his distaste for novelty winter hats. Would you like to quickly refresh that?
Yes. For those of you with an inexplicably short attention span. But we all know what we're talking about. Like ski hats, big winter hats that have design features designed to make it look like the user has comical hair, where in fact none exists. And it gives you the impression that this person. Definitely gives the impression that you're a moron. When actually,
a moron.
Well, I don't know about that, but yeah, it gives them a false impression, and it's. I think it's a functional hat, so let it appear such, and let it not appear like a novelty item.
Well, here is my latest hat purchase. I got it from my local milliner store at the market. He never lets me down. He's a good bloke, actually. I believe he's a fan of the show as well. So a little shout out to Steve from the milliner store in town.
He's running a milliner.
Sorry?
He's running a milliner.
Oh, I got caught on my nose. What do you think, Euan? I can tell you're impressed.
It's very... Oh dear. Well, it's got ears.
Horns.
Or horns. I mean, Jesus Christ.
That's a good point. We should give a little description of this for our audio listeners. It is a black furred hat that has little flaps that go down over the ears and do go around the back like a kind of hat-based mullet. At the top of the hat are two small stuffed curled horns and a very coarse set of bright yellow-green hair on the crest of the hat, as if to simulate somebody with very poor taste in hair dye.
Oh, yeah.
There's also, interestingly, a little symbol on the front, which appears to be a swirly-based man walking along. I would say, I don't want to say how much it cost, obviously. It's very rude to reveal the pricing of a item of headgear. But I think it's quite good because, well, you often find with some woolly hats, especially like actual real woolen knitted hats, I find them quite itchy on the head. But because this is a much more smooth and soft material, the itchiness is not a problem. It's also it's warm enough that you can wear it in winter to help you out, especially with the ear coverings, but it's not so thick that it's going to overheat your head. So it's, I would say you could wear this all year round if you indeed wanted to.
I mean, you could, I guess. But I think I do hate it when, like, you're in, you know, you're going on like a nice wintry walk and you've got, you know, your hands are cold, your feet are cold, but your head is boiling hot because you've got an overpowered winter hat. Yes, it's
a problem that we all face. Yeah,
it's definitely an interesting item. I for one am disappointed in our local milliner for stocking such an item. I thought he would be above the market, but
well, I asked him actually if he could start to have some more exotic hats, because we were running out of fresh material for the podcast, and he's hooked us up very well, I think.
Yeah, well, there we go. We should start getting commission or something for the business we're sending him.
Maybe we should have him on as a guest one week. If you're listening, Steve, you have my email address. Hit me up. So, enough of all this casual hat chattery. I thought we would move on to something with a little bit more substance. And of course, as this hat barely fits on my head, as regular viewers will know, that can only mean one thing. It's time for the weekly hat debate that you've all been waiting for. It's the hat debate of the week.
Well, the energy is palpable. The atmosphere is dense.
Try and keep it civil in when you write in this week, guys. It's all in the nature of good fun. We had some very distressing fan correspondence after last week's debate. We're not trying to rile anyone up. We are simply sharing our opinions. And it's important to remember that it is an opinion-based podcast. This is not the hat gospel of the new millennia. So, I have the debate for this week is, are hats losing popularity? If you don't mind, I will start us off with my opening gambit. I believe that hats have fallen out of fashion in a major way in recent years, and I do believe that they are no longer the hip item that they once were.
I think that in some, your average person, I'd say, is less likely to wear a hat than perhaps was the norm years ago. But in some circles, they are still seen as trendy. Occasionally, you'll see hipsters sporting a fashionable a flat cap or something similar. But I think it in some circles their popularity is waning, and in others it is growing. I think it very much depends on where you look.
I think my evidence would be there's many different types of hat that exist, obviously, and it's only a very small percentage of these types that are still even socially acceptable to wear outside, right? Unless it's like an extremely particular scenario. For example, a Panama hat, you would never see someone wearing a Panama hat.
Oh, no.
Or the classic example would be a fedora. Fedora hats are very disrespected in the cultural psyche nowadays, and being seen with one is in fact something of a social death sentence, I would say.
Especially in you see in media from maybe the late, what maybe the 50s, 60s, 70s. I can't quite put a date on it.
No,
but businessmen going to work, you'd see, generally, father figures leaving the family setting with, suit and tie, a big jacket, and a hat. Whereas these days, especially in those in the world of business and in work, hats are very rarely seen. Whereas once they were almost a necessity. Almost.
This is true. Yeah, the wide-brimmed hats, such as fedoras and Panamas and trilbies, used to be extremely popular, and many, cultural icons of the era would be seen wearing them. For example, Al Capone and the Mafia. But also, if we look to fiction, Indiana Jones is, of course, he lives in the 40s and that kind of time period, and he would never be seen without his trademark hat, going so far as to risk life and limb to save it from a closing door in one memorable scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Indeed.
And nowadays you just don't see that. How many people do you know who are willing to risk their life to save their hat? Too few, I would argue. Too few.
Indeed, I can barely think of any.
No. Yeah, outside of me and you. It's hard to name really.
But then when your livelihood is so based on the milliners industry, but if you're a regular working man, you'd never see that level of dedication to headwear.
No.
But yes.
I do think maybe one. I suppose it's almost like a phoenix as the era of the wide-brimmed hats starts to die, a new era can thrive, and I believe we are currently living in the era of the novelty hat. Never at no other point in history, except maybe ancient Egypt, were people so ready to put animal-based headwear on their heads.
Indeed. And you see these days people wearing hats about the house, whereas pure hats previously have been really seen on as a both a fashionable item but also a functional item. And you wouldn't wear one just for comfort purposes or to cheer oneself up. It was purely...
Unless, of course, it was a nightcap.
Yes. As the example you're sporting now is, I
well, this is not strictly for sleeping use.
It has another purpose. Ooh.
Well, it's just a novelty hat.
Oh, it's a novelty hat. Very nice. For the nightcap, like if we cast our minds back to one of the most famous hats, I think, in all of media, Grandpa Joe's hat in Charlie of the Chocolate Factory.
I was thinking you were going to say Scrooge's hat in A Christmas Carol.
And a similar example, the nightcap was seen as, again, as a necessity of the medium. You know, this person is seen in bed or in a state of preparing for bed. Thus, they have a nightcap. I can't think of a single person that wears a nightcap these days.
No. I think sadly the popularization of central heating has gutted the nightcap industry.
Certainly, the increase in use of electricity, along with the rise of global warming and non-renewable resources, has been the final nail in the coffin for the nightcap industry.
It's quite sad, really.
I think many of us, especially during this time, are heating our houses more than ever. And I think it's important to show our support for the nightcap industry. And so if we can coordinate enough, we'll see if we can get a fundraising link in the description and on our website. And if you can give to support the time-honored tradition of the making of nightcaps, we'd be very grateful.
We would be. This is true. So speaking of Grandpa Joe and Scrooge, what are some of your favourite fictional characters who are known for wearing hats?
Well, I think the main one who's, especially in the case of, Scrooge and etc., where the hat was seen as a basis of the character.
Yes.
Would be, I think, Sherlock Holmes with his deerstalker.
Of course, the deerstalker.
Obviously, in the books, and then obviously brought back in the series on the BBC. The hat was brought back because it's such an iconic part of his character. Whereas he doesn't seem to have, especially in the series, much of an attachment to the hat. It was given to him as a gift that he wasn't particularly keen on, but because of the media attention surrounding him and the hat, he wore it on occasion because it's what the people wanted.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost the fans have more of an attachment to the hat than the actual character ever did. Yes,
so while he's well known for the hat, he doesn't have, it seems, much, again, as you said, an attachment to the hat, and he definitely wouldn't have the level of attachment to it that other characters such as Indiana Jones, as we mentioned earlier.
Yes. I can't imagine Sherlock Holmes risking his life for his deerstalker.
No. I can't really think of any other characters that are so, it seems, in media, so much links to their hats, but
immediately jumps towards it. One that immediately jumps to my mind would be the Mad Hatter from Alice in Wonderland, who is, of course, named after their attachment to their hat.
Yes.
An interesting thing, I don't know if you know this, I've got a little bit of trivia about the Mad Hatter. Even before the writing of the book, Mad Hatter was a common phrase in parlance. Do you know why that is?
Oh, no.
It's because they would use, I believe it was mercury in the hat making process, and the mercury would get into their blood and actually drive them insane.
Oh, right.
And so many hatters were indeed mad. And perhaps this can help explain the sudden increase in novelty hats. I'm not sure. Maybe they've gone back to using mercury in the process, and because of that, we are now inundated in froggy hats, among other animalistic headwear. Indeed.
I don't wish to lower the tone of the podcast, but it's not. Is it terminal mercury poisoning from the hat process? I'm not.
Almost certainly, yeah.
This should be a public health issue worth of national attention, but the fact that it's being silenced is certainly interesting.
Okay, I've just looked it up. So it comes from, they used mercurous nitrate in order to cure the felt to make the hats. and this gave them exposure to mercury vapours, which then caused mercury poisoning.
Oh.
Is it terminal? I'm not sure. I believe, depending on the volume of mercury, it could very well be terminal, yes.
Oh.
So there you go.
Yet another factor leading to the downfall of the hat.
Possibly. That's a good point. I didn't consider that. That's a very good point. I think before things get too dire, we should move on to our next segment, which is...
Oh, I can't wait.
Celebrities in headwear. Over the past week, we've had a few sightings of famous celebrities wearing hats and headgear. Bradley Cooper, for one, who's an American actor, was seen in New York wearing a baseball cap of sorts. It's very nice and very good. He's carrying his young infant daughter, who's also wearing a hat, but hers is not a baseball cap. It is, in fact, a woolen bobble hat. Do you have any comment?
Another example of a functional hat.
This is true.
Hats on babies are seen as cute for some reason. I suppose because it covers their otherwise ugly head.
Scalp, yes.
But also it keeps them warm, I imagine.
Probably. Very important, I imagine, because they are only small.
Another celebrity seen in a hat. Obviously these days, the whole time dilation, it's hard to keep track of time. But Winston Churchill, famous for his bowler hat.
Indeed.
And that's another example of where a celebrity and their connection to the hat seems to be based both in media, but also stretches out very connected to that. Whether it's a specific hat or style of hat, I'm not sure.
And has, in many ways, I would argue, cemented the bowler hat as an icon of British culture.
Yes, there's, it's very much, it's seen as an image, along with many things of the upper echelons of British society, but also Britain as a whole.
Yeah.
Also, I think whether it was, I imagine it was in style before Churchill, but also him wearing it led to a boom of people wearing bowler hats. And I think that may be similar to where I believe, I'm sure you'll know this. I know we're both big fans, almost idolising them. But Billie Eilish with her bucket hat was seen. I looked at pictures.
Speaking of Billie Eilish,
oh yes.
She was at her premiere event for The World's a Little Blurry, and she is indeed wearing a checkered bucket hat.
Oh, there we go. So I looked at pictures and I couldn't find many of her in bucket hats. I thought it may have just been a one-off, but that's definitely played a part in the rise of the bucket hat recently.
Yes, yeah.
I had a trip planned. I won't go into details, but we thought we'd all get matching bucket hats. I paid this guy £3 to get a bucket hat. Yeah. But then the trip got cancelled, so he's now there. He's probably had a bag of sweets or something with my bucket hat money. Utterly shameful.
That is.
But it does show how, a celebrity held in high esteem can have a massive throw in how a certain hat is viewed, and the areas in society that cherish the bucket hat and have had ownership over it, it seems.
And indeed, it also shows sometimes a celebrity doesn't even have to wear it all the time in order for it to become iconic.
It's only once or twice, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Another celebrity who's recently been seen wearing a hat is the comedian Bob Marley, not to be confused with the music artist. And I'm tempted to count this as wearing two hats, for indeed he wears a baseball cap both frontwards and backwards, which I would count as in wholly entirely different styles, and therefore, even though the material in the hat is exactly the same, and molecularly it is the same, because it is being worn in such a different way, spiritually, I believe it is a separate hat.
Or could it just be a regular wide-brimmed sun hat that has been trimmed for reasons of aerodynamics?
It's a very good question. I wonder if, in fact, the origins of the baseball caps could be entrenched in jury-rigging one's own wide-brimmed sun hats.
Yes, it could be. It could be that the baseball hat came out from the area of fluid dynamics. I mean, we'd have to explore that further before we comment.
Perhaps we can have that for next week. Yes.
So just bringing it back slightly to our previous nightcap conversation. Do you think there's a reason why the nightcap is so similar in shape to the so typical Santa hat? Because they're both, conical, often slumped to one side.
As is also a Smurf hat.
I can't hear what you're saying. Okay, there we go. That's better.
As is a Smurf hat, of course.
Yes. One came first. I mean, obviously the Smurf hat didn't come before the Santa hat. But
no.
Because Father Christmas, as we know him, is a commercial or a creation of the capitalist society. I believe it was the Coca-Cola company. I wonder if that was based off of the nightcap, or if they designed a new hat and accidentally came up with the nightcap again. I don't know.
I think an interesting thing to note is nightcaps. We associate them with the elderly, or at least I do. You know, both Grandpa Joe and Ebeneezer Scrooge are both getting on in their lives, as is Santa Claus. Perhaps there's something in that. I'm not sure.
I mean, when was the last time you've been to an orgy or a sleepover or something where people have turned up with their nightcaps? They seem to have not be as present in the teenager population.
This is true. I wonder if it's perhaps to do with as you get older, obviously your body becomes weaker and more susceptible to the cold. And of course, if you are a gentleman and you start to lose your hair, a nightcap can provide a artificial alternative.
Indeed, yes.
Which actually, that's interesting. Does a wig count as a hat?
I was thinking this earlier. Should we include the wig makers in the milliner world? I think a wig...
Blessed are the wig makers.
Yeah. It's tricky, isn't it? How would we define? Because a wig slips on over the head and provides a notable change in appearance. But does a hat need to go over hair? Does that mean bald people can't officially wear hats? I'm not sure about the basic basis of the lexicology, but I believe that I wouldn't have an issue calling a wig a hat, I don't think.
Well, I believe my definition of a hat it's a bit complicated. So imagine a sphere, right? That's like your head, and there are. If we cut the sphere in half, so we have a top dome and a bottom dome, right?
Yes.
And the top dome, imagine there's like a curved like plus on top, right? So there's like two axes, right?
Oh, yes.
There's like front to back and there's side to side.
Yes.
I believe for a hat to be a hat, it has to partially cover both of these axes, right? Which is why, as we discussed a few weeks ago, I do not believe headbands are hats because they only cover one axis, not two.
Yes, right? I agree.
And like those, like, you know, at Christmas people wear like reindeer antlers on their heads.
Oh yes,
they're like on those bands.
Yeah, again, not only novelty paper Christmas crowns.
Well, that's
there's a crown a hat.
I would say it is because it's like a curve here and a curve at the back. It needs to have at least two curves to be a hat. And it has one curve here, and then it has another curve at the back, at the front and the back. That's two separate curves.
You're talking out your arse. Okay. Well, I don't quite follow your logic, but I think in terms of a royal crown, that obviously, I believe it's got material inside. So it's as if, to use my baseball cap example, let's pretend it is a crown. You've got the dome of material, and then I believe the
spikes, the crenellations.
Yeah, I believe they go around. So when I think a paper Christmas hat wouldn't be a hat, a regular crown is.
Interesting.
But I think we're still no closer to determining whether a wig.
I would say it depends how you are wearing it. I believe if you are wearing a wig with the intention to hide your real hair or your lack thereof, I believe it is not a hat. But if you are playing dress up and you choose to wear a wig for fun, then I believe it is a hat. Yes.
I mean, if you're wearing it to cover some form of baldness, for example, or a more permanent solution. So sometimes they're kind of glued on with special glues. And a hat is not a permanent.
No, asphyxiation.
It's got to be, I think, easier to take on and off, I would say.
Yes, yeah.
And something's got to cover the whole head. So a wig that one would wear to change one's appearance briefly, like you see with celebrities like, I believe, Lady Gaga, things like that. A temporary fixture to have. But I think otherwise.
Okay. So last week we asked you all. This is a good segue. Last week we asked you all if you thought that helmets are valid hats, and I believe we have some of the best answers that people have written in with. Euan, do you have one to hand?
Yes, I do. In fact, this is from Peter. I'm not sure if that's a screen name or his real name, doesn't say.
Well, thank you, Peter, for writing in, nonetheless.
Yes, and he says that to some extent it may depend on the helmet, because some go below. This is paraphrasing. Below what you said, the second venture into the second hemisphere.
This is true.
So, I therefore believe it may depend on the helmet. Lots of love, Peter.
Well, thank you again, Peter. I think there's a lot of. I think Peter's a very smart man. I know my explanation with the curves and the number of curves was maybe a bit underdeveloped and could do with some refining, but I do believe if a helmet I think a helmet can venture into the second hemisphere of the head at least a little bit and still be a hat. After all, winter hats that flap over the ears, we would still count as a hat. But I believe if it goes down and also covers the front of the face, now it's a helmet.
Well, that could, yes. Like, for example, a balaclava is not a hat because it covers the face.
Exactly, yeah.
And to me, like a knight's helmet, they have the bit that goes shook.
Yeah, if it has the visor. No hat has a visor. Of course, a poker hat is called a visor. It doesn't have a visor.
Well,
it is one. That's different. Yes.
And also a space helmet covers the whole head. But then, in a tricky situation, I mean, that's a space helmet and knight's helmet, and you've also got had in my head, it's gone. Oh, like your classic World War I helmet that covers the head but not the face. So they're all helmets, but some are hats and some are not.
Yes.
So there's a tricky. I'm happy to go with the rule that if it covers the eyes or any portion of the face, then it's not a hat. But
I'm glad that we can come to terms on this. Barnaby from Chesterfield writes in, and as you know, this is a somewhat family-friendly show. We don't like to feature expletives on the show, so I have had to remove some of the words from a very colourful message. Thank you, Barnaby, from writing in. He says, "You two are both and I hope you end the show."
I mean, we can use our imagination. I mean, thank you, Barnaby, I believe, for giving us
not all. That's not all.
Imagination. Oh, okay.
Comma. Your and into. I want. Semicolon. Eat. Again. Stop. Well, thank you, Barnaby from Chesterfield. Yes. You know what, Barnaby?
Lovely place.
You can go and blank your own blank, you blank.
Yeah. Get fucked, you cunt.
Yeah. Right, so we're about to wrap up the show, but as we always do before ending, we will leave you with a specific hat shout-out. So, play the hat shout-out jingle. This week's hat shout-out goes to the fez worn by Matt Smith in his portrayal of the 11th Doctor Who on the BBC sci-fi drama TV show Doctor Who. He wears a fez much like the one I am currently wearing. And an interesting fact that you may or may not know is this is probably inspired by British 20th century comedian Tommy Cooper, who originally popularised the fez. He wore it during his stand-up comedy acts after serving in Egypt during the Second World War.
Oh, really?
Because, of course, the fez is a popular hat in Egypt. And that's where he got it from.
Oh, lovely.
From Egypt.
Did you know that in certain countries, the Royal Navy is not allowed to arrest pirates from certain countries because the punishments they'd face in their own countries means that they would be eligible for British asylum. It's not hat related, obviously.
Still very interesting. There's also a popular indie game was released called Fez.
Oh, nice.
I believe it may have won some awards. It came out in 2012. It achieved a 9 out of 10 rating. The titular character does indeed wear a fez, rendered in beautiful pixel art style, which lends itself to the fez because of its almost cube-like structure. It's more of a trapezium, you could argue. but it works. If you're working with a small resolution, you can easily do it with just 4 red pixels, or indeed 1 red pixel.
Oh, lovely. Well, there we go. I think that's just about everything for this episode.
Yes, I agree. A very good episode, Euan. I will give you a virtual handshake.
Oh yes.
Would that we could meet up like we used to in previous weeks' episodes of Chat Hat Podcast. Alas, lockdown has forced us to do it over the internet, but regardless, I doff my hat to you.
And to you.
And of course, to you, dear viewer. Thanks for watching and or listening. And remember, as always, keep hatting.